how did it come to this? Well, you see, last year we built an addition, and in so doing I learned there was no window flashing and no house wrap on our home. Just wood and then fiberglass insulation. So this fall I've been working to add house wrap and exterior insulation to the rest of our home. As with any project of this nature, I find myself trying to think of what I might want to do now that I can't easily do later. And as such, I've been thinking about our front entrance. It's tight. I don't think we have much of an option to build an entryway right now, but what if I added a small cantilevered bump out to the living room, with a built-in seat that would free up space and offer the potential for additional storage space as well, all the while disinclining visitors from their imminent collision with the living room furniture. And so, after pitching the idea to the wife, and doing some measuring, researching, and calculating, we did just that. So I got started by doing some general layout on where the bump out would be tied in, and then began cutting and prying away at the siding. It did not give up without a fight, though. And, of course, no job like this would be complete without the supervisor.
I think you are.
One complication with this project is that the heat pump line set is running out of the wall and into the crawl space right in this area. Thankfully, the multi-tool simplified the process of cutting around it. I think I'll be able to actually almost completely hide these lines on the inside corner of the wall and bump out when I complete siding and trim. Next, I began to cut a notch in the rim joist, through which the new 2x6 floor joists would run perpendicularly. Unfortunately, I didn't have my reciprocating saw on hand for this, so I had to get a bit creative. Thankfully, my neighbor had one that he let me borrow.
Yeah, like watch here. Wouldn't that have been nice earlier?
Then I cut out 2 additional floor joists so the new floor could tie in about 4 feet beyond the rim. Make sure you've thought through the reinforcement of this whole system before you start cutting floor joists out, though. I decided it was best just to assemble the whole floor outside and slide it into place rather than going through the laborious task of building it in such a confined area as the crawl space. Here I'm checking the joists for a crown, and if there is any, I'm making sure that it faces upward. Turns out I didn't have any long framing nails on hand, so I had to use 3-inch screws for this part. It took some convincing with the sledgehammer, but it went in eventually. I only had a small scrap of Advantech on hand, so I had to cut it into a few more pieces than I would have liked. But after some spray foam adhesive and screws, it worked just fine.
Louie cat. Hey, Louie.
Then, it was time for some wall framing. Which was unique. Can't say I've ever framed a wall so much larger than the floor it's being fastened to. So, I put it together in this trailer. I ripped down some board foam on the table saw to create a small 1/2-inch thermal break in the window headers. I also cut a 5-degree bevel on the cripple studs beneath the windowsill, just as an additional protection against water infiltration. I did mess something up here, though. You'll get to see that later.
What do you think of the new wall?
Good.
After tacking it all together, I carried the wall over to its final resting place, at which point, the camera died. I braced it to the existing wall and called it a night. Now it's time to put together the small end walls. And just like that, after ensuring everything was plumb, we tied it all together.
Go, baby, go! Come on up. Now she comes, folks.
Now it's time to finish demo from inside the house. I started by removing trim and then the V-match pine. Burnt bacon? I didn't think so. There's a baby going after my pouch.
She probably like to empty it.
She found some screws in it.
She's like, wow, this is fun having Daddy working at home.
It's pretty great, isn't it, baby? After screws are the best toy. It's becoming open. Then I cut the studs out. And disconnected the wiring. So now I've got to cut this header out and cut these studs a little bit higher and then make a header that spans this entire opening as opposed to the old window opening only. Then I pieced together a larger header to span the new opening, which did not go in easily. After that, I had the unique task of redirecting the wiring to create a junction in the Nook. Since we're tying in along an interior wall, there was a 2x6 mounted perpendicularly to work around. Also, it was mounted in quite a crooked fashion, so this area required a fair bit of shimming to make the new wall plumb. Then, my brothers-in-law showed up and helped me get the zip sheathing on. They made pretty quick work of it while I cut and fastened the double top plates and cut out the window openings with my router. So much sawdust.
I know.
What you doing? Are you a good boy? Are you a good dog? Yes, he's a good boy. You're not quite sure what to think of all this?
Next, it was time for rafters. I started by using an angle finder to determine the angle to cut at the top of the rafter. Then, I set it in place and marked where I wanted the bird's mouth to land on the new wall.
Turned out pretty nice.
After a test fit in a few different places on the wall, I traced the first rafter as a template to the others and set to work cutting all the additional rafters and setting them in place. After fastening them in, I cut some of the sheathing out of the way on the left and right, and I placed a sheet of zip on the roof and secured it with some nails. Then, having saved the example rafter, I cut a few more pieces for framing the gable end overhangs. Wifey showed up just in time to cut the ladder blocking. She has a unique talent of showing up just when the miter saw is needed. There was definitely some inconsistency in width between these new 2x4s and the pieces I reused from the wall we just cut open. But I just made sure the tops were as aligned as I could manage, and it worked out just fine. I used 3-inch lags to pull the overhangs in tight to the rest of the roof framing, and then fastened the roof decking into the ends before cutting it to final size.
Like the right window? Are you able to? Perfect. Thank you.
I also enclosed the entire roof assembly in zip to maintain a continuous air barrier from floor to wall to roof. Then I insulated the floor. It's usually best practice to put the paper facer of the insulation facing what is the warm side most of the year. So in the north, that's inside, and in the south, that's outside. But I'm not concerned about condensation in this particular instance, and I wanted the convenience of the facer being there to staple the insulation in place with. So I did just that. Had to get a little creative to put the sheathing on the bottom, but worked out. Then it was time to tape. And tape I did. It was at this point I made a remarkable discovery.
Houston, we have a problem. Something's wrong with our window opening size.
No.
Uh-huh.
Is it too small or too big?
Too small. Somehow.
By how much?
An inch or so.
Oh dear.
I always check my window openings when framing. Well, apparently not quite always. Somehow I just forgot to subtract the thickness of the windowsill from my dimensions, and the window opening was 1.5 inches too short. If you're ever going to mess up a window opening, never mess it up by making it too small, especially only to discover it at this point. Thankfully, after pondering over the issue for an evening, I realized the frames of these windows are just thick enough that I can get away with simply enlarging the window openings on the outside. In more conventional framing, I would have had to cut out some studs and fix it, but since I'm adding 2 inches of board foam, I was able to just increase the size of this window butt. Had there been a bigger discrepancy though, I would have been in trouble. After mounting the window butts in place, I began the process of flashing and installing the windows. I started in the lower left and right corners by using a couple small pieces of zip stretch tape.
Hey, look, it's your daddy.
Then covered the sill with flashing tape. After that, I applied caulking, Lexel in this case, to 3 sides of the window flange, top, left, and right. I like to use exterior grade cabinet screws for window installation. And so I start by reasonably centering the window in the opening, then I lift one corner a bit and secure it. Then using a level, I lift the other corner until it's bang on. Then I proceed to screw about every other hole in the window flange. Lastly, working from the lowest point to the highest, I tape the left and right of the window and then the top. Should be pretty well sealed up at this point. Just as an additional note, it's worth making sure that your tape wraps around the window butt completely if you happen to be doing exterior insulation like this. That way you ensure there's no draft coming in where the pressure-treated lumber meets the green face of the zip. After that, using a knife and drywall square, I cut the first sheet of board foam to size and tacked it in place. When cutting this stuff, doing it in multiple passes is so much easier than trying to cut all the way through in one go. Then, after a little more insulating and spray foaming, what was once outside is now officially inside. I think that's where we'll end this one for now, but next time I plan to start on all the finishing details, including making a built-in seat for the Nook. In the meantime, I'd better go get that house wrap, insulation, and siding up on the house. See you soon. Thanks for watching.